What is up, guys? I am the Senator, and today we're going to be looking at how one of the biggest changes coming to Rainbow Six Siege with the release of Operation Stillwave will result in somewhat of a nerf to our girl, Nokk. Okay, so just like in my last video I did on Nokk, I'm going to preface this by saying that I pronounce her name differently. Get over it. I've been pronouncing it Nokk since she was announced. But anyways, one of my favorite additions to Rainbow Six Siege that is coming with the release of Operation Stillwave, which I think goes live sometime this week. I'm not really sure. I think it's this week. It is the addition of the new proximity alarm. And I have a whole video dedicated to my thoughts on the proximity alarm, so I'll put a card for it up in the top right hand corner for those of you who want to check it out after this video. But something that I'm not really a big fan of when it comes to the new proximity alarms is that even if Nokk has her ability active, the alarm will still go off whenever she's in its area of effect. And I see this as very problematic for Nokk. And I think it's kind of obvious as to why this is a problem, but I'm just going to go into it anyway. Nokk is an operator whose entire ability revolves around the fact that she is able to sneak up on the defenders without them having a clue that she's doing so, cloaking herself from all information gathering devices. But it seems as though the proximity alarm is one device that will be excluded. Now, I will say that I may be a little biased, and I'm trying not to be, but Nokk is one of my favorite operators, but the whole point of Nokk is that you cannot gather information on where she is, whether it be through the information tools that the defense has available to them, or just being able to hear because she's silent. But the bigger reason as to why I see this as a problem is not because she's one of my favorite operators, but because this seems, at least in my opinion, you may have a different one, but the addition of the proximity alarm is like a slight nerf to Nokk, and she is one operator who does not need a nerf at all. And I know what some of you are thinking, the addition of a counter isn't actually a nerf, and you're kind of right, but I see that having a device that reveals Nokk's position defeats the entire purpose of bringing Nokk. Nokk has been an operator that, until a few months ago, when she got the buff to her FMG9, she has been an operator that has not been very popular. Whenever she was released, she was just like another attacking operator where most people used her for a few weeks, and then they went back to playing whoever their main was before that. We all thought it was so cool that we finally had an attacker who was like a mix between Vigil and Caveira, but nobody really wanted to stick with her, keep playing her, because she was an attacker who at the time had a very mediocre SMG, and she was an attacker that did not have an ACOG. And on release, she didn't have frag grenades either like she does today. And I think whenever she was released, she had a Claymore and a breaching charge. Don't quote me on that. That was over a year ago. I don't really remember. So she was an operator that released with not having the greatest fragging potential, and she didn't really have much utility. You would much rather have a Zofia, Ashe, or Twitch when it comes to fragging, and then you need your Harbreacher and a Thatcher, so she didn't really fit in well with the attacking roster. But since she was released over a year ago, she has received frag grenades and a buff to her FMG9, to where she now sits, in my opinion, as a very underrated operator. And while she doesn't bring a ton of utility other than having frag grenades, she still has some fragging potential even without an ACOG. So Ubisoft has built Nokk up and got her to the point where people who play her are the ones that really know how great she can be. And there are still some who thinks that she needs an ACOG or a buff to her speed, but as of right now, I think that she's in a very, very balanced spot, and I can understand as to why some would think she would need an ACOG or a speed buff. However, the win delta chart doesn't really say so. Her current pick rate is at like 2%-ish. It's definitely less than 5%. So a very small number of people are actually playing Nokk. So I've said all this to paint a picture that Nokk has come a very long way and is a lot more viable now than she was on her release. And yet her pick rate is still so low, and some still think that she needs a buff, which again, I could understand why people would think that. So Ubisoft has taken so many steps forward when it comes to trying to make Nokk more viable and get more people to play her. And I see something as simple as her being able to be detected by these new proximity alarms as a very significant step backwards. Because looking at Nokk as of right now, she is not an overpowered operator. The game is not at a state where people are just clamoring and begging Ubisoft to do something about how oppressive Nokk is. It's the opposite. I've never heard someone use the word Nokk and overpowered in the same sentence. And I think that if I took a poll and asked players what their opinions were on Nokk, I think that a lot of them would say that she needs an ACOG or a speed buff or something to make her more fun and desirable to play, or something to make her have more team-oriented utility. So I'm left scratching my head, and honestly, I think this was something that Ubisoft didn't really think about and they didn't really consider. And many may not see this as a big deal, considering that many don't really play Nokk very much. And if that's the case, if nobody's playing her, if you the viewer rarely play her, having a gadget in the game that renders her useless in a lot of scenarios just hurts this operator that Ubisoft has been trying to build up in the past year. And it's my personal opinion that the best state that the game can be in is in a state where operators are picked as evenly as possible, and there aren't operators that are overwhelmingly great, that there are operators that will never see playtime. And Nokk is one of those operators that rarely sees playtime, so she needs all the help she can get to increase her pick rate. And some may not see this as a big deal because the proximity alarm is a secondary gadget that is only available to a few operators, so it's not something that may be dealt with in every single match. And you may be right, but I've spent a lot of time in the test server playing with the proximity alarm, and I can tell you that whenever it comes to the live build, I will definitely be reconsidering the operators that I play, and I will be trying to play operators because they have the proximity alarm. Like Rook, for instance. If I'm in a situation where my team is not doing well and I have to take the reins and try to drop as many bodies as possible and just frag out if I expect to win, usually I would play Doc for obvious reasons. But looking forward, I'll be picking Rook for that reason because he has the proximity alarm and is able to feed me information that my teammates may be reluctant to give. And I spoke about this in my video on the proximity alarm. It's able to give me information passively, and that's just such a valuable tool. And another example, whenever Still Wave drops, you'll rarely see me playing Jaeger anymore. The only time you'll see me playing a Jaeger moving forward is if our defense just absolutely needs that, denial of enemy grenades. We don't have a Jaeger or Wamai, and we need a roaming presence. Other than that, I will be playing Wamai a lot more, considering that he has some aspects that are better than Jaeger, and the proximity alarm meshes very, very well with the way he uses his primary gadget. And so, some of you may not see the proximity alarm as something huge or game-breaking, but me, as someone who solo queues most of the time, I will most definitely try to play operators who have the proximity alarm. And I can assume that there are quite a lot of people like me who will be using the proximity alarm so that they can gather more information. So, with the addition of a tool to gather information passively, there's no doubt in my mind that Nokk should be immune to being detected by these proximity alarms. And it would be different if Nokk's ability was passive and it was just constantly on, but this is an ability that she has to manually turn on and only lasts like 10 seconds. So Nokk players would have to drone out and know when to turn on their ability. But with an operator that's so underpicked, and with the addition of a gadget that is, in my opinion, the most useful secondary gadget on defense, and I will die on this hill, this seems like an unintentional nerf to Nokk. At least I hope it's unintentional. It may not be because, UB likes to take away things that we like. But I honestly cannot think of a reasoning as to why they would have the proximity alarm counter Nokk, considering that she is so underpicked. And the last thing she needs is another reason for people to not pick her. She's an attacker without an ACOG, and a lot of people automatically won't even consider her because of that. So that's why I'm assuming that this is just something that got overlooked, and I hope that's the case, and I hope that moving forward they will change this to where she can counter proximity alarms. But anyways, what do you think? Am I blowing this out of proportion, or do you guys see the proximity alarm as a counter to Nokk as a problem? I'd love to hear what you guys think on this topic. I would like to thank you guys for sticking around until the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. That helps me out a lot. Also, remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon. That way you can be notified every time I post a video. I'm very close to hitting the 10K mark, which I honestly cannot believe I've made it this far this quickly. But if you were to subscribe, that'd help me out a lot too. I am the Senator, and as always, have a good one.